One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to One Question. Our guest today is Vince Volpe. Vince is the Deputy Director of Athletics and Chief Operating Officer at the University of Texas, Rio Grand Valley. Greetings, Vince. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Ty. Great to be with you.
Now, Vince, maybe 2.5 years ago, down there at UTRGV, you guys came up with a strategic plan for athletics. And of course, the school was relatively new, so you had to fit the plan into the university's plan. What was your role in developing and really implementing that UTRGV strategic plan for athletics?
Well, Ty, you're exactly right. What we did is the first thing, we created a athletics planning committee, which was inclusive of our entire executive staff, including our athletic director, Chris King. And for those that aren't aware of our story down here in South Texas, UTRGV officially opened its doors in September 1st of 2015, and it was created through the assets on campus at the University of Texas Pan American and the University of Texas Brownsville. I won't get too far into the weeds regarding the political reasons for doing so, but what it created was an opportunity for both the university and the Department of Athletics to create a strategic plan that aligns with the universities. And so our part specifically was very collaborative in making sure that we understood and followed the mission and vision from the university and from our president, Dr. Guy Bailey. And then specifically for myself, some of the areas of responsibilities that were critically important for me to pay attention to were what we call the 3 F's: facilities, finance, and fundraising. All 3 of those units I have direct responsibility for. And then some of the other pieces, as we put together not just our strategic plan, but as we were building our culture, our tagline, I'll call it, of 16 sports, one team, is something that we used at the University of Missouri. The number was different there. It was 20 sports, one team, but something that was really easy to say, but hard to live out. And I think what we've done a great job here is not just saying it, but living it. Right. And you know, to expand on that a little bit, also our culture is defined by our 4 Ps, which this is important for any organization, whether it's General Electric or UTRGV Athletics. It's our purpose. We know what we're here to accomplish, which is preparing our student athletes for excellence in life. Our people, which again, that tagline of 16 sports, one team, but any organization will either rise or fall based on the people they have within it. Our process, which everybody has their process: mission, vision, core values, expectations, short and long-term planning, and then of course our product. And here's where I want to share a brief story with you. When I was at the University of Missouri, my first few months on the job, former athletic director Mike Alden and I were walking around a facility, and this facility was under construction, and a freshman student athlete was coming towards us. And so we stopped to engage in conversation. And as we did that, let's just make up a name, Joe Smith. Joe started asking Mike about the culture of the department and what could he share with his parents. He was from a different part of the country. He had only been on campus for a few months. And as I sat there and observed the conversation, I realized that the kid was actually reciting the 3 core values for the University of Missouri Department of Athletics. Those core values being academic integrity, social responsibility, and competitive excellence. And so that story, that was 15 years ago, Ty. So that story has never left my memory about how critically important it is to create a culture and a vision, but ensure that it gets rolled out in a way that is not just bought into, but believed. Because here we were in a hallway under construction, and a freshman student athlete was reciting what the core values of that department were. And so I shared that story with our athletics planning committee, and three of our 6 accountability statements under product are academic success, social responsibility, and competitive excellence.
That story you just told had to be pretty transformative. And let me explain how you just described it and what I saw, right? You were in a hallway that was under construction as a part of Missouri athletics. You were young in your career. So your career is pretty much under construction as you're building your career. And then you come across a freshman who it was your job and Mike Alden's job and everybody who worked at Missouri to construct this person's athletic and academic career so they can move on. And this freshman comes up and asks a question that shows he understands the culture, or at least he had somewhat of an understanding of the culture and was trying to get a better grasp of it, of Missouri athletics, from the architect of it all, Mike Alden. And that had to be a pretty transformative part of your career as you move forward, enough that you brought it to the table when you had an opportunity to create a strategic plan.
Absolutely. No question, Ty. You said it very eloquently, better than I did.
Well, why do you believe, of course, Chris King there is the athletics director. Why do you believe it was important for him to include you and the rest of that executive staff? I guess there was 6 of you in a design and implementation, because I've talked to him before, and that was very important to him to make sure that it was understood that all of you had a voice in creating that plan.
Well, for 2 reasons, Ty. I think Chris is very inclusive in all aspects of his leadership here with our department, which provides 2 things. One, I believe it's critically important that when we include our entire executive staff in this process, what it does is it creates buy-in. And the buy-in helps with the implementation and the execution when we roll this out. So we're specifically talking about our strategic plan. So when we, as the 6 of us in that room, have a vested interest in designing it, the words in the document are ours, not someone else's. So when we hold each other accountable, or we hold the sports that we oversee accountable, or the units that we work with accountable, we are speaking the words that we wrote. And that, I think, is very important, because when things are decided in a silo, or plans are decided or implemented in a silo, they lack buy-in. So it was critically important for us to be included in the process, because as you will see in reviewing this strategic plan, it is very measurable and specific. There are numbers that we can look each other in the eye in and say we either met or failed these certain objectives. And then secondly, being included in the process helps all 6 of us form our own leadership beliefs in how to, if we are serving in the athletic director chair one day, how we would like to set up our specific strategic planning committee, or how we design our annual core priorities, or whatever the case may be.
Right. Well, it sounds like the culture there that has been developed is inclusive leadership. I have a saying, I call it responsive feedback, meaning people want to know that their input is heard and potential useful. How does this exercise of inclusive leadership, how has it proven to be beneficial for the department as a whole, all the way down to student athletes, beyond just the executive committee that helped put together the strategic plan?
I think for me personally, what it has done is affirmed my belief in inclusive leadership. Through this strategic planning process and other initiatives that we've had throughout my almost 3 years here in the Valley, I've seen specifically inclusive leadership really transform our department in all of the ways I discussed earlier, from whether it's our culture, whether it's our people. We've had some variation of new staff and new head coaches. And when they come into our department, within the first 30 days, what they're doing is sitting down and reviewing a specific athletic department orientation process. They will go through one on campus as well, and they'll do that in their first week or so on the job. But then we come behind and align with that process, but get more granular for our department. And so what we've created is a process from literally the first month that a new head coach, assistant coach, or staff member is in our department. We are developing buy-in from literally the first month on the job. And so this inclusiveness really has held each other accountable. Everybody knows, and it doesn't, whether it's strategic planning, we do our annual core priorities. We've rolled out in the last 2 quarters professional development for everybody in our department, whether it's sales strategies for tickets, specific unit action plans. The list goes on and on. But what inclusive leadership has done, and specifically through Chris King, we've created ownership, which leads to accountability.
Right. And of course, accountability is the glue that keeps a team together. And so specifically for you and your career, you mentioned earlier, what do you think this has done for you, specifically being a part of that strategic plan? It sounds like you've learned a lot about this inclusive leadership. You worked for Mike Alden, so you've seen a variety of successful leadership development. But in terms of you, what did this strategic plan, creating this, what do you think that has given you for the future when and if, as you probably hope, and I hope too, that you become a director of athletics?
Sure. I think for me personally, what this process has allowed me to do is look through the lens of the athletic director. So a lot of times, and you mentioned Mike Alden, I've been fortunate in my career to work for some titans in our industry, whether it's Mike Alden at Missouri, Mike Carter at Oral Roberts, who's coming up on a 20-year tenure, Ward Manuel when I was at the University of Connecticut. These gentlemen are all outstanding. But working here for Chris King at UTRGV has specifically allowed me to look through the athletic director's lens and be able to see how things like the strategic plan are developed through essentially a inclusive but labor-intensive process. And I'll somewhat make light of it. If you looked at the last page of our strategic plan, it's a graphic that says we have a strategic plan. It's called Doing Things.
Right.
And what's funny about that is, as you and I were talking earlier, a lot of strategic plans have lofty, goal-oriented wording, but are short on metric attainable numbers. And that's we took the exact opposite approach. Most of everything you see in our document, we can look across the table at each other and say, did we meet this or did we not? And if we didn't, how do we as we continue to evolve through these 5 years?
Well, Vince, it sounds like the role you're playing as Chief Operating Officer, the measurables were important to you based on your background. And it definitely sounds like you've learned a lot and grown a lot throughout your career. And then now coming up with this strategic plan has set you up to potentially be a very successful leader of your own department in the future. Vince, I just want to thank you for joining us today on One Question.
Well, thank you, Ty. That's very kind of you to say, and certainly honored to join you on the podcast.
That was Vince Volpe. He's the Deputy Director of Athletics and Chief Operating Officer at the University of Texas, Rio Grand Valley. And this is Ty Brown with One Question. Now, Vince mentioned a number of things that are important, from inclusive leadership, responsive feedback, walking with the elephants, and accountability. And I think there have been a ton of things we can learn from this conversation. Once again, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.